Welcome back to episode 2. When I was thinking about how to structure this episode, I was really overwhelmed by the vast amounts of information that there is to cover. Originally, I was going to have 2 separate episodes, one where I discuss hearing people's views of deafness, and one where I discuss deaf people's views of deafness, hence the 2 pictures that you see. But I decided to combine the episodes because it makes more sense to discuss the interactions between these 2 perceptions rather than to discuss them individually. Another issue that I had while researching and structuring this episode is that I didn't know how I was going to speak on deaf people's views of deafness because I will never fully be able to understand what it's like. Instead, I have decided to let deaf art and pictures do the talking themselves. So let's start with how deafness is viewed in the hearing world in America today. Many of the most obviously offensive and discriminatory stereotypes towards deaf people have been deemed inappropriate over the years, but some of the more subtle ones still remain. As you'll notice in the picture that you're looking at right now, there is a poster on the right for the movie Coda. This is a recently released movie that you may remember from this year's Oscars. The movie is directed by a hearing director, and it tells the story of a teenage girl who is a child of deaf adults, otherwise known as a CODA. This movie did really well, and it has been really well received by the hearing community, making it one of the main exposures that many hearing people probably have had to CODAs in their life. While it is good that deaf stories are being told in mainstream media, some things about this movie only contribute to negative behaviors and attitudes towards deaf people. But the hearing community hasn't quite recognized this. The main issue with the movie Coda is that the actress who plays the Coda in the movie has no affiliation with sign language or the deaf community in real life. This is evident throughout the movie because the actress has noticeably worse signing skills than her deaf coworkers. It wouldn't be culturally appropriate for a person who doesn't have an accent or speaks Spanish at all to play a Spanish-speaking role in a show, so I don't really understand why it's acceptable and sometimes even inspirational for someone who does not know ASL or understand the CODA identity to act as a CODA in a movie. This shows that while stereotypes and prejudices about deaf people have improved over time, being that hearing people now regard deaf stories as inspirational rather than deaf people as evil, there is still no attempt for hearing people to get their information about the deaf community from deaf sources. But one deaf community role model that is known in the hearing community is Nyle DeMarco, who is pictured at the top left of my collage. If you are a member of the hearing community, you might recognize this deaf actor and advocate as the winner of America's Next Top Model or as a contestant on Dancing with the Stars. This is because these 2 shows are examples of mainstream media in which hearing people make up the large majority of the audience. What is interesting is that to deaf people, Nyle DeMarco is less famous for these appearances and better known for his work as a deaf advocate, his part in a deaf TV series, and his short films and books. This shows that, even at a surface level, deaf and hearing people have different perceptions of public figures like this. Another thing that hearing people think is an important aspect of deafness is the cochlear implant and hearing aids, which are pictured in the collage. This is because the belief that deafness should be cured or fixed is still a prominent idea in mainstream society. Videos of deaf people hearing for the first time with the cochlear implant are considered emotional and inspirational. But to deaf people, these videos are disrespectful and dismissive of deaf identity and the community as a whole. One of the primary beliefs among deaf people is that deafness is not a disability and it does not need to be cured. Portraying the cochlear implant as a solution to the problem of deafness only further divides the 2 groups and increases in-group favoritism. Now that I have talked about perceptions of deafness in the hearing world, I'm going to talk about deaf people's perceptions of being deaf and living in the hearing world. Take a look at the photo at the top of the collage with the orange frame. You will see a girl sitting on the floor, panting like a dog, with a group of adults with blurry faces sitting behind her. This work, created by deaf artist and advocate Susan DePore, is titled Family Dog, and it is a commentary on the experience that many deaf children have with being born to hearing parents. The young girl, who is presumably deaf, feels like a foreign animal in a spectacle with the hearing adults talking and looking down at her. The faces of these people are blurry because the deaf child is confused when she looks at them and cannot understand what they're saying to her. On the other hand, the The other orange framed picture, painted by deaf artist Chuck Baird, shows how deaf people feel inspired and creative with the limitlessness of ASL and the vast ideas that they can express and the beauty of their language. Now, ultimately, a social psychologist would say that the differences in these perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors about deaf people are inherited and also learned through direct and indirect experiences with the attitude objects.